Hello and welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we're doing at about 3 a.m. on Friday morning. Joining us from the center in Philadelphia for the last time this year, following the New York Knicks, yet another thrilling game against the 76ers. But the series is over in 6, and there for it all was our Tim Bontemps. Hello, Timothy.
Ultimately, the Knicks outscored the Sixers by a point in this series. I think that sums everything up right there.
We're going to talk about joining us from Dallas, Texas. He and I were in California a few hours ago, but now we're not. It's Bam MacMahon.
Howdy, partners. We're still on West Coast time, Windy. It ain't that late, although I do feel like we are trending toward the Windy sleep update.
Well, it's going to be a lot of complaining on this one.
I actually feel okay right now. I mean, I got delayed on my way home from LA in Phoenix tonight and was late, although I can't really complain because Bontemps has been up. But, you know, the problem is I have Get Up, and the conference, the Zoom call is in 3 hours from now. So, but Jackson's going to be the one who's paying the biggest price. He's not going to sleep for hours. But anyway, forget about all that. Of course, this game was going to come down to the final minutes, and of course it did. And of course, we're going to see some great performances from the star players. That kind of went without saying, Bontemps. And, you know, Jalen Brunson, you know, there hasn't been much in the way of Knicks history in the last few decades. And whenever you think about Knicks history, there's always like John Starks and Allen Houston and Patrick Ewing, and there just really hasn't been much between then and now. And what Jalen Brunson did in this series, maybe the Knicks will go on and do some other stuff this year and next year, but I kind of feel like what he did here will be one of those things that's talked about by Knicks fans, you know, general NBA fans for a while. He had his third consecutive 40-point game with 12 assists. Was absolutely tremendous. And
I got a couple stats for you about that.
Yeah, I have been traveling, so I am behind on Mr. Stats Williams. Take it away.
Well, Jalen Brunson scored 40 or more points in the final 3 games of the series. Last time that had been done was 1989 against the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Michael Jordan. I seem to remember who that was.
Michael Jordan did that. In 1993, Michael Jordan scored over 39 points in 4 consecutive games. That's the last time that was done, before Jalen Brunson did it, the last 4 games of this series. And to answer your question, Jalen Brunson has played for the Knicks for less than 2 full seasons. He is already unequivocally the best guard to play for the Knicks, says Walt Clyde Frazier, who called the game tonight with our Mike Breen. It is truly remarkable. We've said it a whole bunch of times. MacMahon watched him play for years in Dallas. We saw him come to New York. What this guy has done over the last 2 years is unprecedented in just about any way. And I was walking off the court after the game. Jalen Brunson was standing there doing the Inside the NBA interview where he gave some stick to Kenny Smith about
some
beating
trash.
North Carolina.
That's how happy he was tonight. He actually talked some trash.
The Villanova guys talk trash about Villanova, which they did a lot.
Well, they talk trash during the game, but Jalen never talks trash in the media.
Well, Jalen talked trash about Temple when we were at Temple last week, and he talked trash to Kenny about North Carolina. But standing a few feet away, not surprisingly, was Rick Brunson, his father, who grabbed me on the way by and said, that was something, huh? And I said, yeah, man. Your kid is doing some pretty special stuff. And he just started laughing. And I mean, it is unbelievable to see how this team has just embraced everything about Tom Thibodeau and about Jalen Brunson. You got the 3 Villanova guys sitting there after the game, making jokes about the owners of the other team buying all the tickets so the Knicks fans couldn't get in the building. You got Jalen Brunson passing the ball to Josh Hart for the game-winning 3. You got Dante DiVincenzo guarding Tyrese Maxey most of the game. Tyrese had a terrible game by his standards. I mean, the whole thing is just remarkable. And now they play a Pacers team in the second round with a certain coach who has some history with Jalen Brunson that I'll let MacMahon tell in a bit. And the Knicks are going to be massive, massive favorites to make it to the conference finals for the first time in 24 years. So
yeah, and look, I don't expect Jalen to say anything but nice things about Rick Carlisle. He's certainly not one who is interested in stirring stuff up in the media and enhancing some pretty juicy storylines. But 3 years ago, Jalen Brunson played 10 minutes in a Game 7 loss, and he didn't play a whole lot more than that in the previous few games. Rick basically pulled a plug on him in that last series against the Clippers. The Game 7 ended up being Rick's last game as the Mavericks coach. I can assure you this, Jalen remembers getting essentially benched in that series. Now, you can say, hey, the Jalen Brunson who got benched and this Jalen Brunson are two different guys. And sure. And you know what? He did have some struggles.
They're not different guys? Right up here.
Yeah. But he was also fourth in the Sixth Man of the Year voting that year. It's not like he was just some random backup. And again, that's something that I know for a fact has been, will be in Jalen Brunson's mind. And, Rick is not apparently he has mellowed significantly in Indiana. He definitely was not the easiest guy to play for in Dallas. And because he was not going to say anything to Luka for the last few years, because that relationship had been damaged by Rick early on, as I chronicled, Jalen got a lot of the stuff that maybe should have been going to Luka. A lot of the film sessions were particularly harsh on Jalen. So again, how much personal feelings there will be, I don't know, but I think there is definitely a decent chunk of Jalen Brunson that would enjoy absolutely lighting up the Indiana Pacers in the second round and bouncing them from the playoffs.
Jalen Brunson's entire career has been proving people wrong. You don't think he's going to enjoy taking out Rick Carlisle to go to the conference finals? He will never admit it, I'm sure, but every part of him, I'm sure, is thrilled that they're going to be facing the Pacers Monday night at home and getting a chance to take it to Rick after that. I don't think there's any question about that.
Truly a franchise-changing transaction.
Oh,
the definition of franchise-changing transaction.
He's on by far. I mean, he's on the Steph Curry contract now. I mean, they might not. They're probably not going to have the run the Warriors had for many reasons. But you sign a guy like this on a deal like this, it allows you to do all sorts of other stuff, and it's what's set up this entire run the Knicks are on now.
Well, I would anticipate that he will not pick up the player option. He will get a massive raise.
I would anticipate you're right.
This summer. I've got a pretty good hunch on that one. But look, Barkley said it today. He's been one of the best free agent signings ever. And like we can talk about.
Well, in terms of free agent signings that changed teams, because guys who,
right.
But when you think about the free agent signings who changed teams.
I mean, yes, that is definitionally what we're talking about.
Right.
You're talking about like somebody. Steve Nash. I'm talking like in the last 20 years. Steve Nash.
Hey, what do those two guys have in common?
Right.
Go on.
Shaq, probably just off the top of my head without Shaq.
LeBron.
On
multiple occasions.
Durant.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Steve Nash.
Kawhi.
I can't put him in. There. I mean, he's. I don't think he's ahead of Brunson. Put it that way.
Honestly,
the analog here is Steve Nash. Not just because of the Dallas thing, but because of what he did. He completely transformed what at the time was a fairly moribund franchise. Obviously, Phoenix was a little more so, but lifted that team to a whole run for the rest of that decade. And that's what the Knicks are staring at now. For the next several years, Jalen Brunson's right in the beginning of his prime. This is a team that for the next 4 or 5 years, at least, you would think is going to be at least a really good team in the Eastern Conference. And the thing that was super exciting for me as a neutral being at this series for the past 2 weeks is the Sixers are in the same spot. I'm sure we're going to get to them in a bit, but these are two teams that are probably going to meet more times in the playoffs. And that's going to be awesome after this. It's going to be absolutely awesome. And by the way, in a couple of weeks, we could be getting the first of what could be several Knicks-Celtics series over the next several years. And that also has got a chance to be awesome. So it just sets up for a lot of fun in the East.
I don't think it's a stretch at all to say that Brunson is the best sub-max free agency signing since Steve Nash. And very similar, right down to the numbers they wore in Dallas, which, by the way, Brunson wore that because he loved Steve Nash growing up. And And, Nash was the perfect fit to go play for D'Antoni. Brunson's the perfect fit to go play for Tibbs. And off they go. And Brunson, the other thing is he makes the Knicks, and this is, we'll just touch on this quickly. It's down the road. They've still got playoffs to play, but he makes the Knicks extremely attractive for a star who might be looking for a change of destination, because you've got a co-pilot if you're a star. He's a superstar now. Nobody ever imagined Jalen Brunson would be a superstar, but there's no other way to describe his production and his impact.
Something else I want to say. Svi Mihailuk, Ryan Arcidiacono, Cam Reddish, and a protected first-round pick. That is what the Knicks traded last year for Josh Hart.
Wow.
Josh Hart had the game-winning basket essentially in the game on Thursday because there was a bunch of free throws, and I don't want to ignore the free throws that Brunson.
Listen, we can ignore the free throws.
They missed the free throws in Game 4.
Listen, the story of the series throughout the series, something Josh Hart talked about before the series was going to start, was that the Knicks were going to have a lot of wide open Josh Hart threes because he shot 30% from three during the season. And Nick Nurse, one of the most creative coaches in the league, was going to leave him open. He was going to guard the other guys. He was going to dare Josh Hart to shoot the ball. Josh Hart, in many ways, won the Knicks this series by shooting the lights out of the ball in games 1, 3, and 6 in this game tonight. And the three he hit at the top of the key, Jalen Brunson drives the left side of the court, gets down in the paint, draws a couple defenders, kicks it up to the top of the key. Tyrese Maxey's caught between Dante DiVincenzo, an excellent three-point shooter, and Josh Hart, not an excellent three-point shooter. Didn't go anywhere. Josh Hart looked to move the ball, said, well, I guess I'm going to shoot it. Knocked it down, raised his hands up in the air, and the Villanova boys did it again.
Yeah, and this was, the three-point shooting with Josh Hart is, I don't want to say it's a bonus because it is critical if they're going to play, if defenses would play him that way. But dude, this was just a classic Josh Hart performance. Played 46 minutes, 14 rebounds, 7 assists. One of the other huge plays down the stretch, like the non-Brunson buckets that were huge, were the one you just mentioned. And when Hartenstein tapped out the offensive rebound, Josh Hart scrambles to run down the loose ball, hits Anunoby wide open from on the wing, and Anunoby's got a clean three. Says, "Oh no, there's also a lane to the basket," and goes and dunks it on Embiid for an and one. That was just another classic play because it's the Knicks dominating the offensive glass, out hustling the Sixers, and Josh Hart just coming up with a way to impact the play.
Jackson just posted the stat. Last year in the series that the Knicks lost in the second round to the Heat, Hart shot 24% on threes. And this year in this series, 43%. Speaking of the Heat, I want to quote two Miami Heat coaches. One, and you've heard me say it before, Josh Hart, but Eric Spoelstra from over the summer, Team USA last summer. Josh Hart doesn't get 50-50 balls. He gets 70-30 balls. That's one. Second thing is Pat Riley. Again, you've heard me say it before. In the big high-level playoff games, you play 8 and trust 7.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Thibodeau played 7 and trusted 6 because 48 minutes for Dante DiVincenzo, 46 minutes for Josh Hart, 44 for Brunson, 45 for Anunoby. Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson split the center minutes. Hartenstein getting 30, Robinson getting 18. Miles McBride played 9 minutes. That was it.
And of course, stepped in and banged at least one huge three, too. That shot went about 17 feet in the air.
He was 1 of 4 from the floor, but the one was a big one.
But he only played 9 minutes. That wasn't. That's not trust minutes. But obviously,
he trusts him plenty. He just.
I know, but in this game.
Well, I'm just saying.
Played this sucker to
Dante DiVincenzo's been getting yanked out of a bunch of these games. He's been pretty bad in the series, and Deuce has outplayed him for the most part. But today, played every second, like you said, did a great job on Maxey, and most importantly, knocked down a bunch of threes and played way, way better. And it was a huge part of their win today.
Yeah, and Jackson's telling us that last time a player played all 48 and a series clincher was LeBron in 2018. I suspect that was
Game 7
against the Celtics.
I believe it was Game 7 against the Celtics.
By the way, that year, 2018, which I didn't vote for LeBron for MVP. I think I voted him second. I regret that vote because I've come to believe that might have been his low-key best season, in which he actually played.
Was that the Harden MVP season?
Yeah, and it's not a commentary on Harden, but I regret not voting him first. I voted for LeBron first a number of times.
That was the year when he quit for a month.
I understand.
To then get his team to make trades, as some people who we are friends with tried to argue for why he should get votes in that.
I understand, and that affected my vote. And I'm just telling you that I made a mistake. But anyway, that was the year he played 82, and he played 48 in his end right there. So anyway, we'll be talking about the Knicks more. They're going to draw the Pacers, who we will also talk about in a second. But I do want to talk about the Sixers before we move on. So brutally difficult series to lose. They were in this series because they were in the play-in because Embiid got hurt. They gave away a game in this series that they should never have lost. They won a game in this series that they should never have won. The correct result happened. It was fair in love and war. In the end, I noticed Joel was blinking tonight, Bontemps. So hopefully he's blinking with his left eye. So hopefully he's feeling better. He had 39 on 25 shots. A very good performance. Played 40 minutes. Nick Nurse actually took him off the floor briefly in the start of the fourth quarter. And they didn't get blown out in those minutes, but it wasn't good minutes.
Well, they lost by 4, and then Jalen Brunson sat for 2 minutes, and they lost those minutes by 4, the Knicks. So it ended up being even.
Okay. The thing about it is, in this game, Buddy Hield, who hadn't played at all in the last few games, they were in trouble. They were down 20. Nick Nurse goes to him and he hits 6 threes. But I just want to point that out before I frame this. In this game, Kyle Lowry goes scoreless, and Tobias Harris.
Well, yeah. Listen, you could just stop right there. Tobias Harris was a 0. And this was a fitting end for Tobias Harris's time in Philadelphia. He took 2 shots. He was completely invisible. Kyle ended up not playing much because Buddy Hield came in and became a human torch, and he just ran with Buddy Hield.
That's why I wanted to mention that.
No, I know, but this is the Sixers had basically a $40 million goose egg in this game. And if you look at the failings of this team, Kelly Oubre had a really good year. Nick Batum had a really good year.
Had a very good
Lowry
game. Both
coming
had
in.
Good games tonight.
Yes, he did. Lowry coming over as a buyout guy has made a huge impact on the team.
Great value.
And Tobias Harris hasn't been good enough. And that's ultimately the problem, is they were paying a guy $40 million who wasn't a $40 million player.
Well, and it's Daryl Morey's job to use that cap space and to get a significant upgrade this offseason. If they do that, obviously, health is going to be a factor, but if they do that and get a little bit of health luck, the Sixers can be a threat in the East next year. If they can't upgrade that spot, then it's hard to see the Sixers, doing at least enough damage to get out of the Eastern Conference. And look, Embiid, he obviously had one really rough game in this series, but given everything he was dealing with, this was a pretty amazing first round performance from him. And it, sucks for him that he's bounced, but plus 46 with him on the floor, minus 47 with him out. That kind of sums up a lot of the series.
It was minus 47 in roughly 40 minutes with him out.
It's been the story of his
45 minutes.
Yeah, it's been the story of his entire career.
He ended up averaging. Am I correct in saying this, Bontemps? He ended up averaging a point a minute, Wilt Chamberlain level. When it was all said and done.
In the regular season, he was over for sure.
Yeah, so he ended up averaging a point a minute, and when he was off the court in this series, despite everything that was bothering him, it cost him a point a minute.
Yep.
Yeah, and you know what?
No, go ahead.
I was going to say the Sixers. This season was a bummer for them because Embiid missed so much time, because he was dealing with so much, because that knocked them down in the play and all that stuff. But the fact that they found, without a doubt, that they have a legitimate co-star who is not even near his prime yet, a guy who's going to can be a co-star with Embiid for, however long Embiid has left. That's a pretty massive development for Philadelphia.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, Joel always does these podium interviews at the end of the thing by himself. I don't think it was a coincidence on any level. He was sitting there with Tyrese Maxey today, and he has been a supporter of his from the beginning. And I think that was a nod from him to say, hey, it's me and this guy going forward. And being in the locker room after the game, we've all been in a lot of these losing locker rooms over the years. And it was interesting seeing in particular Lowry and Batum, two guys who have been around for a long time, sitting there at their lockers for a long time. And, I know Kyle is definitely going to be back for at least another year or two. He has made that clear. He's not retiring. Batum has talked about possibly retiring.
I'd like to advise him not to.
Well, I will say that today I said, hey man, you should not retire. You're still a pretty darn good player.
Yeah, and, I would say depending on how the Paris Olympics go, that might be a pretty sweet storybook ending.
It could be, but I think I would guess he's going to be back ultimately. But, you see guys in their mid to late 30s, especially, who've been through a lot of playoff runs and seen a lot of stuff. Kyle joked, he's like, you see, I haven't changed yet. I've just been hanging out in here because I think it's year 18 for him at this point. And it doesn't get, as he said to me, it doesn't get any easier when you lose these series, especially when you lose a series like this, where every game was a toss up. And look, let's be honest. The Pacers were embarrassing for most of the series against the Bucks. Whoever won this series was going to be a prohibitive favorite to get to the conference finals.
Yeah.
And if you get to the conference finals, who knows what happens at that point? And that was the undercurrent of this whole series. Both sides knew this was really a conference semifinal in the first round, and that there was so much on the line for every second of it. And that made it all the harder for the Sixers to take, especially considering all that had gone on and the fact that they felt like they would have been a top 2 or 3 seed, and instead they were 7th, and they had this matchup, and the way it all played out, it's despite the fact that it's the 7th straight year that they have been in this position and they were obviously down about that. There was also this other undercurrent of they've got Maxey, they've got Embiid now with this sidekick, they've got $60 million in cap space, they've got a bunch of draft picks, they have interesting vets they can bring back. They have the ability with Daryl Morey, with Nick Nurse, with these guys to maybe be finally a stable team with some continuity going forward and put together a group that can make a real legitimate run in the East. But that's a talk for another day.
They have $55 million in cap space, and then they can sign Maxey. Maxey will be a restricted free agent. But the way it's computed out from Bobby Marks, the $55 million in cap space, which they can use and then sign Maxey. And that is enough for a max contract, 10-year max contract. They can sign any free agent. You don't have to use cap space only by signing players, and they have extra first-round picks. Maybe not extra, but they have a couple of first-round picks that they got in the Harden deal, and that they can use to sweeten the deal also.
Daryl Morey needs to earn his money. They paid him a lot of money.
He got an extension within the last year. So I think he got an extension after doing the Harden deal, if I'm not mistaken, but maybe I have it wrong. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, who knows how many of these guys will actually be back? But I know Embiid and Maxey will be back, and that's what's most important, I think. I really did think Philly at the peak of Embiid's powers. I wouldn't have picked him against Boston, but I watched that series go 7 last year, and I realized Boston's better than they were. I would like to have seen that again, and that's notwithstanding Milwaukee. But I thought the I thought the peak of their powers, Philly had a real chance. And by the way, I now have to acknowledge that New York can touch these levels. I mean, say whatever you want to say about our guy Kendrick Perkins. He has been saying for 6 months that the Knicks could do this, and he has been saying for months, and not that people doubted Brunson, but he's basically saying that Brunson is an MVP level player. And
well, listen, I voted him first team All NBA and voted him on my MVP ballot.
Me too.
So,
well, and the other thing Brunson is, and I mentioned this going in the series, he is a proven playoff go-to guy. He's a proven playoff performer. And he did it in Dallas when Luka was out, did it last year with the Knicks, did it again in this series. I said I trusted him in the playoffs more than Embiid. And look, Embiid played his ass off in this series. Like Embiid had a really damn good series. Brunson had a historic series, and the Knicks move on.
And I think that's an important point because, look, I have chronicled all of these Sixers collapses in recent years, right? The Ben Simmons missed dunk in 21, the
missed dunk, he didn't even shoot it.
Right, the passed up dunk, the terrible performance in the second round against Miami where they lost here in Game 6 2 years ago. The game last year in Game 6 when
I remember sitting next to you in Game 6, and I said the MVP's got to carry him home. And he didn't.
They didn't get it done. And I think the very significant, and this is not going to make anybody here feel better, but I think the very significant difference about the way this series went compared to all these past playoff experiences that Philly had was that the Sixers played really well and the Knicks just took it from them and beat them. And that's a lot different than these past years when they collapsed and fell apart and played horribly and like just embarrassed themselves at some point in all of these runs. Like this was one of the best series you'll ever see. And it was a toss-up series. And to your point, MacMahon, Jalen Brunson was better and the Knicks won, but the Knicks had to win it. Like the Sixers, even at the end of the game, you mentioned that OG dunk, the Sixers are down 8 with 2.5 minutes to go. In the past, this would have been just absolute pack-up time. And they're tied with 30 seconds to go. And that's why that Josh Hart shot was such a big deal, because they fought their way back into the game again against this Knicks team. That's not something this team would have done in the past.
What was it? 8 points with about 2.
I literally just said this.
I'm sorry.
Literally just said
it's late. This is a good time for a Winnie sleep update.
All right.
And Winnie's about to go to sleep on the pod. But the point is, the Sixers got beat this time. They didn't beat themselves. And I think for where this team is trying to go, that is an important distinction, even if it doesn't matter right now in the moment.
Well, it is. And for all those warm fuzzies, Jackson just put this stat in the chat. 36 players to win the MVP of the league. Embiid is the only one that never reached the conference finals or division finals back in the day.
Yep.
The ones who didn't make the NBA finals, Derrick Rose and Steve Nash. And there have been a lot of reasons why Embiid has had his shortcomings in the playoffs. As we stated, this series was not, that's not the storyline of this series.
Yep.
But again, this gets back to it is on Daryl Morey to fill out that supporting cast, and honestly, not just supporting cast, to get him another high level starter in there, if not star, to maximize Embiid's chances to make sure this stat is not still true next year.
Well, and listen, the Sixers are going to be one of the most fascinating and active teams this summer for many reasons, and this is a big part of why. We've hinted a lot at the possibility of a lot of big names moving around this summer and star players changing teams. And the Sixers are going to be in the middle of all that stuff. And we'll see what they ultimately end up with. But look, you made the biggest takeaway from this whole series is that Jalen Brunson officially arrived as a superstar. And with the way he played and the way he carried this thing home and won this thing for the Knicks, like, New York is going to be absolutely on fire for the next month at least. And assuming the Knicks can take care of business against Indiana, which I'm sure everybody in Indiana is going to be real mad at me after this, but that's fine. They're going to be sitting there in the conference finals for the first time in a quarter century. And this guy who, Dallas was lukewarm on giving the mid-level a couple of years ago and didn't do it, is now bona fide MVP candidate and literally the best Knicks point guard in a half century.
I know that we said it in passing earlier, but before we move on, if Tyrese Maxey is going to be declared, a star level / superstar level player in an elimination game, it does need to be noted he went 6 of 18.
So superstars, he has a ways to go to prove superstar. He's an all-star caliber player.
Okay.
Well, all-star player.
Well, he's going to get the max in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months. So
the fun max.
But the fun max. Well, mate.
Yes, the fun max.
The fun
max. He's not making all NBA.
I know. But
I think it's not an extension where he could make it next year. It's this year or bust. So.
I know. And I just should be noted that, he didn't. Brunson and Embiid played great, and he did not. And DiVincenzo did play a very good D on him.
Max was awfully good in Game 5.
Yeah, and Embiid
I know. I'm not taking anything away, but
you
can't. If you're going to talk out of one side of your mouth, you got to talk out of the other.
It's true.
Okay. The other game on Thursday night, Indiana boat raced Milwaukee. It was a 20-point win. Two guys came off Indy's bench. Obi Toppin, who gets to play his old team, the New York Knicks.
There you go.
Who kind of gave him away for nothing, like 2 seconds. And TJ McConnell had 20 off the bench. So the bench just dominated the Bucks bench. I mean, the Bucks bench is thin on a good day, but they're banged up right now. But just crushed him in bench points. Dame described about how he wasn't real sure that he should play on that Achilles, but he felt good enough to give it a try, and he was like, bleep it, I'm going to try. And he didn't play great, but he gave him 28, and under other circumstances, that would have been enough. It just wasn't enough in this game.
I'm just glad that nothing went wrong there.
Right.
That was my fear too.
And so Giannis misses the whole series, as it turns out. The problem with the Bucks is their best player, one of the top 5 in the league, misses the whole series. So you can't slap him with an indictment.
I know, man.
No.
But here's the thing.
Don't do this.
Yeah, here's the thing. They look like they were the messiest 30-13 team in the history of the league. They fired their coach, and then they look like crap the rest of the season. So, we're not going to say, "Oh, if not for the injuries, the Bucks might have made a run."
So
look, the Bucks.
So what do you do about it? So what do you do about it?
Well,
what you do is you say the Bucks are the most disappointing team in the NBA this season.
Yes,
that's what you do.
Well, we're not at this stage where everybody's clear disappointment yet. So to this point,
I think it'll be awfully difficult to top the Bucks in that category.
Well, what if the Celtics lose in the next round? Would that be more disappointing? I mean,
whatever. My point is, this is a team that
because Cavs corner would continue, so therefore we'd be happy. maybe
Cavs
Cavs corner would continue.
Cavs need another W.
We know what he's thinking. We know what he's thinking when he's saying that, folks.
Right. This is a team that has fired 2 coaches in the last year. The coach that they have is sub 500 with the Bucks. They went all in to pair Giannis with a superstar he wanted to play with. They don't have a whole lot to show for that. And then we're kind of waiting to see, is Giannis going to do his annual, let me apply some pressure type of stuff in the summer? I mean, he signed an extension at least.
Here's the problem. We spent a lot of time the other day talking about the Phoenix Suns and how the Phoenix Suns have no ability to do anything with their team, and they're not good enough, despite Matt Ishbia saying that the national media is out to get them, and 26 out of the 29 teams would change places with Phoenix. I would love to know who the 3 are. I was very curious to know who the 3 would be.
Does an annual preseason poll of the GMs. I'm going to make a suggestion that they add that question to the poll, because I'm real curious about.
Would you trade your team with the Suns? Yeah, I'd be very curious to know. But all the same things we talked about with Phoenix, they all apply to the Bucks. They have no draft capital to trade. They've got an aging roster with no depth and no ability to improve. And again, Brian, you love to say, well, they're hurt, so we don't know. We do know, because over the course of the season, they never looked like a championship caliber team. The first half of the year, they had an incredibly soft schedule. They escaped from a whole bunch of games that They could have lost against bad teams.
Which is why they fired Adrian Griffin.
Then that's why they fired their coach. Yeah. Then they have Doc come in. The team is then terrible over the second half of the year. They limp in to the playoffs. And look, again, the Indiana Pacers did everything they could to lose this series. And the Bucks, yes, the Bucks were missing parts of the series, 2 stars. Some parts of it, they had Dame and Chris Middleton out there. Chris Middleton, by the way, played out of his mind in this series while banged up. Deserves a ton of credit for toughing it out in this series. But you're talking about him in his mid-30s, Dame in his mid-30s, Brook Lopez in his mid-30s. You got Giannis coming off these injuries. They got absolutely no depth around him. And by the way, they've got an absolutely reprehensible bozo on their team in Patrick Beverley, who's throwing basketballs at fans and is treating our colleague, Melinda Adams, ridiculously in a locker room. The NBA should be suspending him for all sorts of stuff for the way he acted today. And they should be fining him for what he did to Melinda in the locker room.
Well, no, is so honestly, tired, they should find, dude, he threw a ball into the crowd, hit a lady upside the head. Now, that he wasn't aiming for her, but what was his reaction after that? To get the ball back and throw it again at the guy he was trying to hit. He's been fined before for throwing a ball in the crowd. He was fined $25,000 when he did it in Dallas. Now, the fan, a gentleman who's now deceased, but the fan was banned from the arena for the rest of the year because he did say some vile things. But I'm telling you, Pat Bev was more than willing to give his side of the story then. He was asked about it today. He didn't want to give his side of the story because he was acting like this is what Pat Bev does. He gets bounced in the first round and he acts like a fool. Just like when he shoved CP3 in the back, taking that cheap shot, and hey, Tyrese Halliburton quoted Dame Lillard, con man, flip from above the rim. Basically, a bum who talks a bunch of trash, doesn't have the game to back it up. That's what that means. And the most memorable thing that Pat Bev did in this series, other than act like a fool in the locker room, subscribe to my podcast when he's got his stupid beanie on, belt to ass, subscribe to the pod. That's what he cares about after they get bounced in the first round. But the other most memorable thing he did was got torched by Tyrese Halliburton for a game winner. So I'll say this.
In fairness, he had a couple of good moments as a player in the series. His
Sweet.
Other active
this all-time generational defender, the guy who thinks he should be like a 12-time defensive player of the year, got torched for a game winner and his team got bounced.
Well, that's kind of what I think.
But listen, I don't blame him for promoting the pod because unless an NBA team's really dumb, he's probably going to need to transition into podcasting on a full-time basis because we've talked about the pain in the ass to production ratio. Ain't much production, and there's a whole lot of pain in the ass. If you sign Pat Bev, you deserve what's coming your way. There's a reason he's been on 4 teams in the last 2 years, and 2 teams that thought they had a chance to contend dumped his ass midseason.
Well, the Bucks are just about out of assets. They're not quite in Suns territory, but they're pretty.
They got an ass, but they don't have much assets.
And they're, obviously every team has options. They could try to find some takers for some things, but I'm not sure that they're going to be able to materially improve their core. So what Giannis says, if Giannis will speak before he goes on back to Greece.
I'd be extraordinarily surprised if he speaks.
Well, yeah, because last year, the whole thing with the failure thing. I'll be interested to see if Giannis plays for Greece. He is, he had knee surgery after last season, and he couldn't play for the Greeks, and the Greeks did not qualify for the Olympics. So the Greeks will play in Greece. They've got
they're hosting an Olympic qualifier.
Yeah, and that's the qualifier that Slovenia is in. And I'm sure if Luka is healthy, he's going to play. And Giannis has said he wants to play.
If Luka's not healthy, he's probably playing.
Yeah, Luka wants to qualify. For sure. So, but that calf injury. It's the thing about it is this is the thing about the NBA. Joel Embiid got landed on in Denver. And it changed the whole course of the season for the Sixers.
Mm-hmm.
Giannis I mean, he was already hurting in that leg. I'm not saying it happened in that moment.
It didn't change the course because you know what? Like, dude,
no, it did change the course.
No,
they would have won this series if Giannis was 100%.
Really, I'm not going to sit here and let you assume they were going to beat a team.
Maybe I did go too far. Maybe I did go too far there because the
Pacers didn't look ready for it. They would have beat the Pacers, but they weren't going to. I don't think they were going to beat the Knicks. And here's the bottom line: here's what they weren't going to do is win 4 rounds in the playoffs, which is what this team. That was what the expectation.
They weren't winning 2. They weren't
probably
winning 2.
Probably not, but. Giannis, when he's at the top of his game, is a pretty awesome sight.
Okay, the Bucks provide us absolutely zero reason to believe in them.
Well, that's well said. I can't disagree with that.
Yeah, other than just saying, well, yeah, maybe they would have won. I mean, sure, maybe
they
would have won.
The question is there going to be a scapegoat because they've already scapegoated the coach. I don't think they're going to scapegoat
twice.
Yeah. So, all right, about the Pacers, we started talking about them. Sorry. This was a game 7 for them. If they had lost this game, who knows if Giannis would have been able to play in game 7? Who knows where Dame would have been? And they acted like it. They got out to a big lead and they handled their business and they got their role players to play well. And
this is a huge success for the Pacers to win a playoff series
for sure. They went out and hired Rick Carlisle, and they made 2 enormous trades: one to acquire Tyrese Halliburton, one to acquire Pascal Siakam. Mm-hmm. Both of them are really working out. Siakam had a very strong series. They've drafted well with some of their picks, and they kept Miles Turner. Miles Turner wasn't great in this particular game, but he played awesome in the sort of the game that was defining in this series, which was game 4. And, they could have traded him 2 or 3 different times. They kept him. And so they've done a good job, and they've gotten to this point. It's going to be a terrific test for them. I will say, I think Tyrese Halliburton is going to have to play better in the next round. He didn't, he was fine in the series, and he had some moments. He had a game winner in game 3, which was a huge moment, but he was not the force that he is going to need to be opposite Jalen Brunson.
And he hasn't been since the hamstring. I mean, he was absolutely playing at an all NBA level until he hurt his hamstring this season. Like, the in-season tournament was the casual, his coming out party for the casual fan. People who followed the league closely knew before, but like,
he was playing at a first-team All-NBA. Yeah, he was playing at a first-team All-NBA level.
And he hasn't been the same since. And he's going to have to outplay Jalen Brunson to give the Pacers a chance.
I don't know about outplay, but he's going to need more than he gave in this series.
If Tyrese Halliburton isn't the best player in the series, they have absolutely no chance.
There you go. I was going to say he at least needs to be on Brunson's level, and that is awfully high.
Brian, what are we doing here, Brian?
The Knicks are heavy favorites.
If they don't win, it's because Tyrese Halliburton gets back to being the first-team All-NBA guard he was the first half of the season. How are they winning the series otherwise?
I don't feel like arguing with that right now at this point of the day.
Okay.
Hey, I got a whiz of the quiz thing here.
Oh.
And now, to present today's trivia question, the whiz of the quiz.
I was curious. It'd been a while. You know when Rick Carlisle's last playoff series win was, don't you?
I heard the stat today, and I was pretty surprised.
2011 NBA Finals.
I was going to say, yes.
I mean, remember, they went through stripped the team down because they're going to get big-time free agents right after that championship run, and the big-time free agents never came. So, anyways, I said, I wonder if that's the longest gap between playoff series wins for a head coach in NBA history. It is not. There are 3 that have
not the longest gaps. Current one.
No, I'm talking about won a series, playoff. It is the longest among active head coaches.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Who had the longest? And I will say this.
Dick Motta.
No, I'll give you this hint. The series that he won, the last series that he won before a 22-year gap, has been mentioned previously in this podcast. There's your hint.
Doug Collins.
Boom, you're good. God, my hints are too damn
I'm not good. I'm very rarely good in
Doug Collins.
I know both series too.
Yeah.
Doug Collins, 22-year
gap. Buddy Jeanette, I'm not familiar with his work.
I think he coached Bob Pettit.
16-year gap from 48 to 65, 16 season. And then Nate McMillan went 15 seasons. So
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then Rick and Red Holzman. Speaking of Knicks history.
Yes.
That's right. Red Holzman was Phil Jackson's mentor, one of them. Okay, we'll talk more about the Pacers and Knicks coming up here. But I believe I'm covering that series. So I haven't, I went to Indiana for many playoff series in the 2010s, the teens, I guess, including a Knicks Pacers series where Paul George kind of announced himself as a true superstar. And the last time the Knicks played in the second round.
Hey, have you checked the Indiana Fever schedule? You might get to see some Caitlin Clark while you're in town.
Actually, they have to reschedule a home preseason game, which was going to be Caitlin Clark's first game in Indiana. All right. Before we let Jackson start to edit this, MacMahon, I want to talk about what happened, say last night, but it was many hours ago. Wednesday night in LA, in that Clippers Mavericks series. I thought we were headed for a potential classic game, kind of like we saw in Philly.
It was not that.
And the Clippers have let people down a lot over the last 5 years, so I don't want to take it too much out of context. I just couldn't believe how lopsided of an effort that game was. And the Mavericks played like knowing that their season was on the line. The Clippers did not.
Well, and the Mavericks just bullied them. The Mavericks, I believe, were 17 of 18 in the restricted area. Held the Clippers
to 9 of 10, I think.
Yeah, Luka did everything well except for shoot the three. This was by far his best game of the series. Kyrie didn't put up big numbers, but they called the first two plays for him. He got a bucket and an assist, and they wanted him to be aggressive early on and kind of set the tone. Mission accomplished there. Derek Lively II had a phenomenal performance for a 20-year-old rookie big coming off the bench, especially given everything that he's dealing with, with life. Derek Jones Jr., unbelievable. I mean, he's been one of the best minimum signings in the league this season. He's positioned himself to get a nice raise. The Mavericks would certainly like to be the team to give it to him. This was a James Harden playoff dud that you can add to that list.
Stats Williams came up with a incredible stat that stopped me in my tracks about James Harden, while acknowledging that he's had some good games in this series and good games over the last couple of years. That game on Wednesday night was the 13th time in his playoff career that he has shot 20% or worse in a playoff game. Not 40, not 30, 20.
How many times?
He's played in 30 series in his career, and 13 times he has shot 20% or worse. And these were probably not games where he went 1 of 5.
No. 2 of 11 was kind of his standard stinker line. But this was 2 of 12. And I'd have to look up, but it ain't the first time he's had more turnovers than buckets in a playoff game.
I will just say 2 things I'll say. One, before the game, I'm out on the court for about an hour and a half. Exactly what I would expect from that situation. A lot of tension. A lot of people very nervous, executives, players, etc. Now, just to clarify this, and you can speak to this, I have been to 4 Mavericks games in 2 years. I am not around the Mavericks a lot because you are around the Mavericks a lot. So I can't, this may happen every single game.
Well, you don't like me?
Yeah. But okay, it's a tight, we got puckered up, what's, okay, everywhere. And out comes Luka, who I always think of with a red face and a scowl. That's just how I always think of Luka. And
He's either
Luka
got a scowl or a big old smile. There's no in between.
Well, Luka was light as a feather.
It
was like it was a preseason game. He didn't have a care in the world. He was laughing, he was joking, he was super loose. He did like 10 minutes of shooting, half of it he was shooting from half court. It wasn't exactly a Ray Allen pregame workout. Okay, he's dealing with the knee
that's
injury.
what he does. He does these
I
things.
know.
Yeah.
I know.
He does the bets with the assistant coaches. It used to be push-ups. Now they're doing these other kind of exercises for the half-court shooting.
He goes over and signs autographs.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has developed a reputation for signing like hundreds of autographs before games, which he does in the playoffs. But it is not normal. Now, you said to me he signs autographs all the time.
Yeah, that's not unusual.
But not every game is game 5, 2-2 on the road. But I was loosened up watching him. And I felt that the team followed that lead.
He's not a guy who is fazed by pressure. He's
only performed in every situation basically ever.
I mean, he's a teenager winning freaking EuroLeague MVP and EuroLeague Final Four, Eurobasket with Slovenia. He's not fazed by pressure. He loves it. He doesn't love all the media stuff that comes along with it, but he loves playing on the big stage in the bright lights and the competition. His knee was bothering him. It's interesting. He's not on the injury report anymore. But his knee was bothering him. He had a cold, the sniffles and all that, but pressure, he is absolutely immune.
Well, that's what I knew that already, but I saw it manifested. The second thing I want to say is the 10-point game at half. Maybe it was 11. I think it was 10 or 11.
Yeah, 10 point at half.
Obviously, the Clippers were not playing well, but 10 points, not the end of the world. And so now you're coming out for your season, basically, in the third quarter. And so I am expecting, clenched fists and tight jaws.
Yeah.
And the Clippers came out and were barely moving. They were like literally just walking around. And it got to the point where Ty Lue was so desperate for somebody to have any sort of edge that halfway through the third, he called in PJ Tucker, who's been mothballed for almost the whole year.
Yeah, to knock some dust off of his sneakers.
But he was desperate. And so then he calls in Westbrook, who, playing his normal shift. And Russ.
Boy.
Well, so the thing about the Clippers, they have a lot. They can do a lot with their roster, but one of the things that they don't have is some sort of an energy player. They just don't have that guy. I mean, maybe
they have that guy, and he's Russell Westbrook. Yeah. And if you're reliant on Russell Westbrook, you're doomed.
Well, here's what the energy Russell Westbrook did, okay? The Mavericks are in absolute control of the game. I don't remember but it went from 10 to like 22. Okay. Ty Lue is so desperate, he knocks off the dust of PJ Tucker. He brings in Russ Westbrook. Russ recognizes that there's big problems here. And guess what he does?
Missed a bunch of shots.
He took the next 6 shots.
Which some of those were invitation jump shots. Like,
I think you're being kind.
Thank you, Russ. Here, we would like you to take that shot. Let us just back up, get in good rebound position, because this thing's going to clank. Russ got hot late in the game and finished 2 of 11 from the floor. Seriously, I think he made 2 of his last 3.
And that is how it ended for the Clippers in game 5 and maybe in crypto.com as their home.
Listen,
arena.
I said earlier how the Sixers did not look like they did the last couple of years. And let's just say that there's a guy who is not on the Sixers anymore, who's now on the Clippers, who's had a lot of moments like that in the playoffs. And here's the other thing. We spent a lot of time talking about game 5. Let's talk about game 6 for a second. Mavericks have to take care of business in this game.
Yeah.
Kawhi Leonard is not playing outside of basically 3.5 quarters. Without Kawhi Leonard in this series, the Clippers have not been able to score. They hung on and won the first 2 games in the series. Or, obviously they blew out, they had the huge lead in the first half of game 1. They hang on and win game 4. They're not nearly as good as Dallas. Dallas has got to win this game. They get a lengthy break then to get ready to play this Thunder team. What's going to be an absolute war in the second round. Can't wait to watch potentially both these Western Conference series. Both these Eastern Conference series, I think, are going to be awfully boring unless something crazy happens. But you don't want to go, even if they are probably going to win Game 7. You don't need this going back to LA for Game 7. You don't need to be playing another game. Like we talked about Luka's maturity earlier in the series after they went up 2-1 with the way they played in Game 3. Put your foot down in Game 6. Take care of business. Get this Clippers team out of the way. Give yourself some rest ahead of this Thunder series and make sure you advance. Like, let's see the Mavs go out and take care of business in this Game 6.
Yeah, give Luka some rest. And look,
yes,
the Ty Lue and Paul George, it was funny because somebody tried to ask Luka about, hey, you've been in this situation before, up 3-2 against the Clippers heading home, and Luka cut him off. Present, not past.
That was funny.
Yeah, but Ty Lue and PG were happy to bring that up. Well,
what else are they going to say?
Let me just remind you that it took maybe the best performance of Kawhi Leonard's playoff career for the Clippers to win that one. That was when he had 45 points.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like 65.
Stretch.
He was incredible.
He was incredible. Also, as Luka said before the series, when asked to describe what he thought the differences were, he had 3 words. We have Kai. Do you know what Kyrie Irving's teams are when they have a chance to close out a series and he's in the lineup?
Well, a lot of those games were played with LeBron, so that helps.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The record is 12-0.
Oh.
It is the most wins without a loss.
Of course, he wasn't in the lineup in Brooklyn very often, so
well, he has been in the lineup to close out 12 series. He's never had a chance to clinch a series, been in the lineup and lost. So the Mavericks need that trend to continue. By the way, that's a Stats Williams special.
Stats Williams is on fire. He's playing like he's in the finals in the
he's our version of Jalen Brunson.
I requested that one, but I'll give myself a little pat on the back.
Stats are given to you if you hadn't requested it.
All right, it's almost 4 a.m. Jackson's got to go to work. All right, thank you very much for listening to Hoop Collective. Thank you definitely to Jackson. Thank you to Bontemps, who's I don't even know. Are you going home now?
I still haven't.
He's going to go home. I can
get a hotel.
He just doesn't want to tell us he's going to go home so that we don't try to talk him out of it. I still haven't decided. They're going to be like, sorry, sir, you can't check in until 3:00. No, I'm staying for tonight. But sir, the sun is coming up. That's what they're going to say. All right. Mike Greenberg wants to hear from me in like 15 minutes what we're going to talk about on Get Up. So I got to go. Thank you, MacMahon. We'll see if you can make sure the series gets closed out in Game 6 on Friday night. And if not, we'll see you back in California. Talk to you soon. Talk to you next week.
Adios, amigos.